Hello, I'm Nicole de Swart, and I'm here with Ivar Jacobson, the founder of the use case technique. Ivar, thank you very much for having this interview. As you know, I asked a business analyst in the Netherlands what questions they would like to ask you about use cases. So here we go. Use cases became very popular in the past decades. In 2011, you introduced use case 2.0. Why did you do that? And what are the main improvements you made?
So use case had been around for a long time at that time, and the major reason was that we had got a lot of experience in how to use them. We learned a number of new things that we didn't know about before. Most important was that now we were in a new era of software development, the Agile era, and we needed to have some good way of developing software in small iterations or sprints. And we needed to have a systematic way of building in increments, so we could build a little first and a little bit more and so on. We did similar things already back many years ago, but not systematic. So in 2004, when I wrote a book about aspect-oriented software development use cases, we identified the slice concept. We build slice by slice. And that was then developed a little further based on the ideas like user stories and Kanban and Scrum. So in 2011, I think it was very late actually, we used it for many years before we actually published something. And that was in 2011. We wrote a little booklet about use case 2.0, as we named it.
In an agile environment, we don't want to define requirements up front anymore. Which part of work products of use case 2.0 should I make up front? And which part should I make just before or even during the sprint or iteration?
Like many other things, there is some work to be done up front, very early. Very little. We developing a larger system without having, for instance, an idea of the architecture will be very expensive. Developing a larger system without having a greater picture of what the system is going to do will also be very expensive. You cannot just start to do a small little thing and hope that that will grow to be a big system. There are ideas of doing it, but they have not been really successful. So you have to have some early sprint where you actually create the big picture, both when it comes to what the system is going to do and how it's going to do it, let's say architecture. So in very early sprints, you have to identify the key use cases, the key things you're going to do. And these will be form a roadmap. They are not filled with a lot of content. So for instance, you identify the use cases, and normally quite a big system can be realized by just a dozen of use cases. So this is the very beginning. Then you fill it, what the use case really mean, sprint by sprint or iteration by iteration. The same thing with architecture. You start with an architecture roadmap, so you have a big picture of how the software is going to be realized. Then you fill it sprint by sprint with more and more executable code.
Nowadays, a lot of people have adapted user stories. Some of them have replaced use cases by user stories, and others use them both and combine them. What are the key differences and similarities between use cases and user stories?
So, use cases have had its role in the past, but the user stories also have a clear role, namely finding useful elements to develop in a sprint. So by now splitting up use cases into, as we call, slices. A slice is basically one or a couple of user stories that can be done within one sprint and put in the backlog. So we have combined the best from two worlds into one consistent set of concepts that we can realize both the small scale thing that user stores provide and the big picture that is needed when you develop a little larger system. So there is clearly a role for user stories going forward. If you develop something in a small co-located team where you have the system subject matter expert daily access to, you don't really need to think about the big picture. You can do that later. But if you work with more critical systems, life-critical systems, or you work with a subject matter expert that's not available every day, maybe once a year, or something like that, then you need more. And that's where use cases with slices give you this more.
I received several questions about use case slices. In Agile, we don't want to elaborate the whole use case narrative at once, or use case specification, as we used to call it. But what information about the use case do I need to know to split it into slices, and how do I find the right slices?
So this is a traditionally important problem. Already back 20 years ago, we had an answer to that question. It has been more precise now. Basically, you prioritize your slices. You find slices that are important to deal with in some priority. Typically, the most prioritized slices are slices that have to do with risks, eliminating risk. If you implement this slice, you have eliminated risk. So if you start by identifying risks and say, and for each risk you identify a slice that will, if implemented, eliminate that risk. For instance, a risk could be getting an architecture that will work for the next couple of iterations and so on, or even for the whole release is even more important. If you can do that early, then it's easier to fill less important slices into the picture. If you have real-time requirements, need to answer, reply, get feedback within milliseconds, for instance, telecommunication, then that is a risk that you need to address. You need to find a slice that if you implement that slice, you have eliminated risk. And we go on like that. So basically, the way you identify slices is by thinking from risks, and then take one risk at a time and find a slice that, if you implement it, it eliminates risk.
Organizations tend to reduce custom software development and want to apply customer-off-the-shelf applications. Can use case 2.0 be of value in that kind of implementations? And how would you recommend to apply it?
So use cases are not only applied for new systems. Basically, most software we have is old systems, already existing systems. And even for that, use cases are very helpful because they explain what the system is doing. So you can re-engineer legacy systems starting from understanding what the existing system is doing. And that is where use cases are very helpful. You can use them for maintenance of existing system because you identify new things to your use cases that you didn't have, and that is what you change. And you can make it understandable, explain it to people why you do it. Now we're talking about costs, and most software today are not built from scratch. We have reused something. We can reuse a framework, or we use existing components. For instance, in telecommunication, particularly in telecom operations, no one builds a billing system today. Billing system is something that you can buy from many different vendors. And there are customer relationship management system component that you reuse. The problem is you still have to make something sense of this. You have to build something that integrates these in a meaningful way. So already 15 years ago, something like that, I helped Indian companies to build telecom operator systems where they wanted to reuse existing components. And to do that, we started by doing a light use case model for each of these reusable components, COTS, and then we integrated these use cases, make sure that you got use cases that together with these components made something meaningful. So the use case thinking is really applicable to both very old systems that you need to, one way or the other, either just modify, improve, or re-engineer. You want to move them to a new platform, new environment, it's very useful. And for COT system, to understand what the COT system is doing and how it can interact in a bigger environment to make something useful for the users.
That's all. Thank you very much for your time.